welcome to your weekly chance to sit down, take a breather, and listen to us pontificate about your Cincinnati Reds and William Opena. Tim Daniel, I am Seth Shaner. Thanks so much, everyone, for joining us. Tim, how's your week going?
Well, I've been sick because of the change of the weather we often have, but I think we're on the better end. I was going around the house for a few days there, so we have a light at the end of the tunnel finally.
Well, I had a very first world problem this morning when I realized that I use an electric shaver, which I know you don't seem to have to worry about.
Nope.
And I apparently did not put it on its charging cradle in quite some time. And when I pushed the button, it did nothing. So I'm on a day's growth, which probably no one can even tell on this suspect HD camera that I have. And we're going to go, but there's nothing more deflating when you're just barely awake than having something not work. And that's what happens. So here we are. We'll trudge on, right? I guess the first thing we need to talk about this week is I'm not going to go with the transaction because spring training has sprung. Everything's sunny and great. It's around 70 degrees. People have told me out there in Arizona, even though it's 30 and ugly and gross here. I hear you got some snow. We didn't really get any up here in Columbus. But the annual rite of spring, as pitchers, catchers, position players come in and get worked over a little bit by the trainers and the doctors and find out what's aching, we have to find out some bad news.
Right.
And we can jump off a cliff over this news, or we can just cross our fingers and hope it's not much. But Rhett Lauder reported elbow soreness that he's had while he's ramped up his throwing in the offseason, and he's going to be held back a bit. I don't know what you thought about this, but the David Bell over and over and over, it's not a big deal. It's not a big deal. The house is burning down around me, but everything is fine. That's my first thought, and I don't blame anybody out there if that was their first thought as well.
Yeah, that was certainly my first thought because I don't know. I don't think hopefully Tito is going to be a little bit more direct with that, and I think he will. But anytime you have pitcher and elbow soreness to start spring training is not a great sign. So hopefully it is nothing more than just he's going to ice it for a couple days and just let it rest. But yeah, I'm certainly nervous to see what the next step is.
Now, I don't remember last year if you remember. I don't know if from last year you remember what I said, and I remember what I said, and that was that Spencer Steer would not be hitting this way unless he's got something nagging him.
Yeah.
And one of my other favorite, but I don't mean favorite as in I like it, thoughts every spring training is when something's reported and the beat writers and the TV or radio guys just go along with how it's reported. Because I do not remember anyone telling me that Spencer Steer had a nagging shoulder problem at the end of last year. I could be wrong. It's been 4 or 5 months, whatever. But there is a report that Spencer Steer is still dealing with a shoulder issue that he was dealing with last year. And I feel a little vindicated because I do think we did not see the fully ready to go as a hitter Spencer Steer last year. But here he is in spring training with something nagging.
Yeah, great news all around, right? Obviously, a guy that we're all kind of putting a lot of stock into, myself included, a guy I really believe in. So a guy who's supposed to be part of this group as they take this next step forward, especially a team trying to recover from a disappointing season, himself included. So yeah, a little worried there, obviously. But, if all things goes right as they should, Spencer Steer will just be playing first base. And maybe this won't be as bad of a concern as it was if he was playing left field with a shoulder injury. So
there is photographic and video evidence of Spencer Steer both working in the field and taking some cuts yesterday. So I don't think it's something that's going to shelve him, but certainly we would rather see a Spencer Steer that is fully healthy, ready to, and I know batting average isn't the thing these days, but ready to hit somewhere between 285 and 300, get on base at a higher clip than he did last year, and that sort of thing.
Yeah, speaking of that league average OPS, which he kind of flirted with all year.
Yeah, that's true. That's true. We didn't see the Spencer Steer.
Right.
Well, I mean, I think for 2-3 weeks at the beginning of the season we did.
Yeah, that grand slam in Philly, like.
Yeah. So, yeah, and wasn't that a high pitch that he took out the front door? So that shows he had shoulder strength then. Yeah, so, 2 things to leave us kind of wondering Like I said, we are a bit triggered by David Bell's past as manager when he would try to act like everything was just fine, and maybe it wasn't, because in the long run, it just fine ends up being missing the season if you're Matt McLean.
Yeah.
Um,
Or Christian Carnacion Strand. It's not
oh
broken.
no, it never was broken. Wait a minute, there's an X-ray. Oh no. Okay, well, let's look at a few transactions that took place earlier this week. Um, they agreed to a minor league deal with right-handed relief pitcher Josh Stalmont, as I guess that's that how you say it. That's a minor league deal for depth, presumably, but probably on a bigger note. Although Stalmont's numbers were maybe a little better in a short time with the Twins last year, they signed Scott Barlow, and Barlow has 58 career saves. Most of that was over a 6-year period, though, with the Royals. So it's not as if he was a lockdown closer. Um, I saw
Don't say
some.
closer. You know how I feel about that.
Well, I know how you feel about it, but it is a still existing kind of position slash time of the game that is used. Um, but I don't I see it more as insurance against Alexis Diaz not being what we hope he is. Honestly, I would think, in my opinion, Taylor Rogers would probably be more of a candidate to close out games, if not Graham Ashcraft. Um, so I think this is a good signing, and it falls in line with some of the signings throughout the offseason because, as we said before, Terry Francona does a good job with the bullpen, and this is really shoring up that end of the game.
Yeah, I talked about this on Late Night Reds a few weeks ago when we did our bullpen preview, where I said I just don't want to have a year of the revolving door. Now, you're always going to have injuries. It's always going to happen. It's just part of the game, especially for relief pitchers who have to get warmed up really fast at times and then run out there and pitch. But with that being said, this is a major league bullpen now. We're not like
Yes.
looking at this situation we've had in years past where it's like, this guy's going to get called up, DFA'd, go back to the minors because no one's going to claim him. With Barlow, this is a guy I really like a lot. You kind of mentioned going along with some of the moves of the offseason, and he's a highly effective ground ball pitcher. I mean, Baseball Savant has him in the great percentile at the 78%. He's a strikeout guy as well. So last year, his whiff rate was in the 94 percentile, according to Baseball Savant, and he's a strikeout guy.
Mm.
So strikeout ground ball pitcher at GABP is a good sign. This is a great bullpen that, well, I shouldn't say great, but it has all the makings to be a great bullpen. Between the guys you brought in last year, like Suter and Pagan, if they can have good years, and your Taylor Rogers, your Scott Barlows, and your Alexis Diaz's, I'm very excited. I feel very good about this bullpen.
I want to take a moment to give the Reds brass from management all the way down to even pitching coaches and Terry Francona as the manager, give them some credit, because the way normally things work, if a guy like Buck Farmer hadn't signed so deep into the offseason like where he was, the Reds would have just brought him back. And
Right.
I'm not against Buck Farmer. He had a great year last year. I think he flirted with an under 3 ERA. But it says to me that this team of coaches and management got together and maybe saw, hey, Buck Farmer may be a candidate to go off the cliff a little bit and not have the production he did this year. We can do better, right? And again, I'm not sliding Buck Farmer. If they had brought him back, if he would have pitched the way he did last year, I would have been just as happy. But I think it signals something that this organization is kind of evolving a little bit, maybe, or even taking a more serious look at how to build a bullpen.
Yeah, and I think that's the Francona factor, right? I mean, this is a guy who has one of his strengths has been his bullpen ability to manage his bullpen. It's won him a World Series. It's gotten him to multiple World Series. Well, I should say he's won in multiple World Series. But and then Barlow's a guy that he obviously has experience with, so that certainly helps as well. I really like bringing him in. I think this is an awesome move. I think that this kind of, just like you said, solidifies what we think of this bullpen, and I think that for him, one of the great things about that Chapman run was obviously the Marshall Broxton Chapman run. You kind of have that now, not to the same level, because I don't think Diaz is at his peak is as good as Chapman by any means at his peak, but the Rogers, Barlow, Diaz 7, 8, 9 could potentially be something really nice if your starter can just give you 6.
Boy, when they got Broxton, that was almost not fair.
Yeah, it was. It
That
really
was
was.
really a shrewd move by Walt Jocketty and the Reds back then. And And certainly, if you could replicate that, yeah, it would be something else. So, listen, with that in mind, you brought up Terry Francona and the way he has navigated usage of the bullpen, and even on teams such as Cleveland for 11 years, where they didn't have the highest payroll, he was still able to get the most out of it. I reached out to my childhood friend. His name is Jeremiah Ross. He's a huge Cleveland fan. Lives up that way now. As
Go Cavs.
well, he is. I think he likes the Cavs, but I asked him about Terry Francona and kind of his version or his vibe on how he did with the bullpen. He said he was always he wasn't afraid to try new guys and new roles for longer, shorter outings. And the one thing he said they were notorious for slow starts, which could be that idea of, hey, we're mixing and matching here to find the right fit. He said not everything he tried worked, but a lot of it did, and he would go with what worked. And certainly that means they were better late in the year, which if you're a Reds fan right now, that's what we've been banging the drum for is this team has wilted in August and September. Let's see what a fully weaponized Cincinnati Reds baseball team looks like when you get to that point.
Yep, and I think this furthers our point we made last week about Petcoa and their predictions and why they're wrong, because I think with this bullpen, they're going to win them a lot of games this year.
Well, yeah, and those certainly were made before because a bullpen, the bullpen's like almost like a living organism that the parts all kind of matter, and if you do, the projections before it's fully formed, then I don't think it's very good. Now, I guess what do you think, especially if Rhett Lauder isn't able to go on opening day? Do you think they still flirt with Graham Ashcraft in the starting rotation, or do you see him as a bullpen piece going forward?
Going forward, he should be a bullpen piece. Should be my key word there, especially when you have a guy like Nick Martinez who can kind of do a little bit of both and has been successful in both. Nick Martinez was at his best last year at the end of the season when he was starting. So I think that if you have a situation where you can't have Lauder, and Joel Luck up on this show a few weeks back said he expected that Lauder would start in AAA anyway. So if I am the Reds and Lauder can't go for a certain amount of time, hopefully nothing more than just spring training, then I'm going the Nick Martinez route, and I'm seeing what I can get out of Graham Ashcraft in the bullpen.
My goodness, yeah. You've got Diaz, Rogers, Mull, Santillan. Boy, Santillan's an underrated guy too.
Yeah, he was really good last year.
I don't think the rest of baseball understands what he could do. They've got Brent Suter back now. Barlow and Pagan is back, slated to be in the bullpen. We're hopeful for better things this year. And then Brian Shaw, another former Terry Francona guy, is got an invite to spring training, so we'll see how that goes. But then I would love to see Graham Ashcraft take a spot there. That's for sure.
Me too.
Okay. Let's go ahead and do this week's theme. And what I'm introducing here, and I'm going to take full blame. I called you. I was excited. And maybe I didn't do the best way at saying exactly what I was thinking. But in the end, that's why, I know maybe I don't know, were you really upset that the one guy didn't vote for Ichiro? Did that bother you?
Yes.
It bothers me, but I guess the thing for me is, and it only comes out when it's that one, right? But when you have multiple people with their opinions entering into a discussion or a vote or something like that, there's supposed to be differences, right? And I agree completely that no one should have not voted for Ichiro, but I guess it just highlights that idea to me. You could go down through a lot of guys like Johnny Bench, this unanimous type thing's only coming forward more recently with Jeter and then not getting it, but then Rivera did.
Griffey.
Yeah, Griffey too. So I guess for me, that's where I am. And we're only two people doing this. I haven't even queued it up yet, but we are going to put in our top 10 Reds. And as long as Tim and I are still helping man this ship throughout this season, we will plan to do this, I believe, 4 times. We will try to do it. We're doing it now as spring training begins. We will revisit it at the end of spring training when, let's face it, we shouldn't really know more, but we'll think we do by that point, although we could see maybe who makes the team and who doesn't, and that kind of thing. And then we will do it at the All-Star break. We will do it at the end of the regular season. And if they are good enough, we might even do it after the playoffs.
Yeah. So I guess we had different angles here.
Yeah.
Because I went levels of players that I think are the most important for this
Okay.
team to have success in 2025,
All
where I
right.
think you kind of went more like these are the 10 best players for 2025.
I did, but I also think those converge sometimes because if I'm wrong about who's best, it could hinge on whether they do well or not, right? So,
Yeah.
um, I will say I borrowed this idea. People are making lists and doing all sorts of things. It's fine, but the way this is being done was kind of I lifted from an Ohio State podcast, the Kings of Columbus, Doug Maurice and Bill Landis. They do a great job. If you're Ohio State fans, check them out. But this idea of kind of like I want to take a look at something, throughout time and kind of use what we thought before to kind of, affect maybe what we think now and learn from maybe what we see. So this will be a good kind of milepost type thing, I think. So
Yeah.
we can do that. All right. We're going to average these together. I may put these out on Twitter or social media, but but right now we're going to go through and look at our individual best players or most important players, however you want to rank it. Tim, you go ahead and you run with your first.
My first is Matt McClain because I think that if this team is going to take the step we all expect they will, they need a good and healthy Matt McClain. You and I talked about this a couple weeks back. 2023 Matt McClain was incredibly fun to watch, was probably their best player majority of the season. And now it sounds like all things are a go. The Reds yesterday posted a photo of him in CES with the caption of comeback season loading.
Yeah.
And so I am really excited to see what they get from Matt McClain. And if Matt McClain is what he was in 2023 or even and then some, I think the ceiling for this team is incredibly high.
And I'm right. I said last week that to me he's the anchor, he's the glue, he's going to make this team go. Steve Phillips, former Mets GM, and he's now on MLB Network, but also MLB Network Radio on Sirius XM. The XM show that he does in the morning, and actually all their hosts got together on this. They ranked each position 1 through 10 like the best in the sport, and even without having seen him play last year, Steve Phillips still had Matt McClain ranked as number 7 overall in baseball at second base. So I think that shows how good he thinks he can be, and some other folks as well. I went ahead and put Matt McClain third because, again, I'm looking at it more of, I guess, more of like best players right now or best talent, however you want to say it. I know, like I was saying in the Ohio State discussion, you could argue that like when you had to put Jeremiah Smith and Caleb Downs 1 and 2 in either order,
Maybe in college football.
maybe in college football.
Yeah.
But then guys like Will Howard and Donovan Jackson certainly had to figure in when you're talking about meaning to the team and things like that. But regardless, I had Matt McClain 3. My number 1 player on my list is Ellie De La Cruz. He just came out as number 31 in all of baseball in the top
I
100
saw
on the
that. Yeah.
network. And but I don't want to focus on that because I saw that and I thought, he's 23. He's got to cut down on strikeouts. That's probably fair that he's the 31st best player in baseball by whatever ranking MLB Network uses. But what I was impressed with was the panel that was there last night. Greg Amsinger, the host, and Steve Phillips, and I forget the third guy, but Amsinger was beside himself. He said after this year or in the next 2 years, he's going to be top 3 in all of baseball.
1,000%.
He said going into this season, he should be at worst number 20. And that's just because he's so young and he does have a few things to improve on. But he said if there wasn't the fact that Shohei Ohtani also pitches, he sees Ellie De La Cruz as the best player in the sport very quickly. So that was just amazing to me. Like, okay, well, that's good.
Yeah. Anytime a guy's compared to someone like with the upside of like a Ronald Acuna, you feel pretty confident in the guy you have. Yeah, you're right. Obviously, I think strikeouts are always going to be part of who he is, just
Yeah.
because of his talents and abilities. And obviously, as it's been highlighted many of times, the way he strikes on his call compared to other players. But I do think as he matures more at the plate, I think that you're going to see this whole new level. So I do feel like this has the potential to be a 30-90 season for LED Clears, 30 homers, 90 stolen bases. I think that talent level is not a psychotic thing to say. And Seth, I know you're not a betting guy, but I was just looking at futures for stat leaders. And right now, Ellie De La Cruz has plus 10,000 odds to be the home run leader in the National League this year. So in context, if you bet $10 and Ellie De La Cruz ends up being the National League home run leader, you win $1,000. So
Wow.
I don't feel like that's terrible value.
Well, that's not quite a sure thing. Like for me, gambling would have to be I know it's going to happen for me to do it, and then it's not called gambling; it's just called give me money.
Yeah.
Um,
Like last year, I bet stolen bases leader for him, and that was like the easiest money I've
yeah,
ever
that
won.
was pretty easy, and that goes by if he's healthy, I guess.
Yeah.
So I guess though, devil's advocate on your number one most important. If Ellie really is as good as Greg Amsinger thinks he is, and he plays that well this year, wouldn't he be the most important? And I love Matt McLean so much, but wouldn't he be the most important player just because of the talent and the output that means he would have put out?
I don't think you're wrong. Because certainly if Ellie De La Cruz hits his ceiling, then that probably adds 6 or 7 wins to this team's win-loss record at the end of the year. But I think that for it's baseball, right? I mean, how many times did Mike Trout have these incredible years where he's putting up these incredible stat lines and the
That's
Angels win like 74 games?
true.
So if Ellie's going to put up these numbers and the Reds are going to take that next step, I think they need Matt McLean to be not necessarily right along with him because that's impossible to ask for somebody. But, we talked last week. We've compared Matt McLean to Dustin Pedroia. Terry Francona's compared him to Dustin Pedroia. If Ellie De La Cruz is the Ellie De La Cruz we all think he is and Matt McLean's Dustin Pedroia, we might have a parade at Fountain Square in October.
Well, to your point, also the year Dustin Pedroia won the MVP, there were probably better overall players. Certainly, I think Manny and Ortiz were still on the team with him, so
Yeah.
there were better overall players and athletes even on the team. But he still won MVP because of his importance. So I will take that as well and say yes. I'll give my number 2, and again, I'm looking at just best, but importance as well because for the Reds to go where we want them to, this guy has to do a good job at staying as healthy as possible and being out there every 5th day, and that's Hunter Green. He was vying for some serious Cy Young consideration heading down the stretch. He would not have won it, I don't think, over Sale, but he missed his last 7 or 8 starts.
Yeah, he started the last game of the year.
Right. Okay. But he had that window where he missed quite a bit of time, and so he checked himself out of consideration for a lot of those things. But if Hunter Green can make 30 starts this year, which if he's the ace we hope he is, that shouldn't be out of the realm of possibility. I see just continued improvement. Now there's going to be a point where he plateaus a little bit, and he is what he is. But I still see a Hunter Green who can get even a little bit better than how great he was last year.
Yeah, last year 26 starts was his career high. Obviously, but it's been around the range, right? So 24 is rookie year, 22 year 2, and 24 he was shut down because the season was so bad. 22, the 23 season, and then last year 26. Seth, a 6 WAR pitcher last year.
Yes.
It's impossible to say that that's going to happen again. Could it for him? Absolutely. He is that good. But predicting that is very difficult.
The only way
I think he is
yeah.
I still think I would probably give him a 5 to a 5.5 WAR player. You said, I mean, I think Hunter Green has possibility to be the All-Star game starter for the National League next year. That's how good I think he is. So
the way you improve on that though is just make all your starts, right?
Yeah, I mean, for sure.
If he's even just at the level he was last year, he's going to be that high of a level, if not better. Now you're right though, to set that as an expectation is too much. But I do believe he's got ace of the staff mentality and stuff, and therefore I put him at number 2 on my list. And let's talk about your number 2. And I think this goes a long way towards showing the way we looked at this exercise differently. Yep. But also, I've got a counter to your point. But go ahead.
So if we're going to do the Ellie McLean running mates combo that they're often like paired together, this guy is often as compared to Hunter Green as much as possible, and that's Nick Lodolo. We know that when Nick Lodolo is healthy and on the mound every 5th day, very few left-handers better than him in baseball. He has shown the ability to be excellent, and he has shown the ability to be sometimes like better than Hunter Green. I mean, when he's really at his when he's really on. But the reality is that you can't trust him to stay on the mound consistently. And so for me, if I'm going the idea that Matt McLean is so important to this team because you need him to be on the field as much as possible, for the Reds to take that next step, and it's a little easier now with guys like bringing in guys like Brady Singer and having Nick Martinez and the depth of Louder and Chase Burns coming up. But Nick Lodolo for the Reds to hit their absolute ceiling, which you and I think could be pretty high. An excellent Nick Lodolo to go with an excellent Hunter Green changes everything for this team. So I went Nick Lodolo here for most important. If we were going talent, yeah, you're 100% right. But I think that for this team to, reach NL Central winning, potentially win it, go to the LCS, make a case for a World Series contendership, they need Nick Lodolo to be the Nick Lodolo we've seen he can be.
Well, if we could go on talent alone, and if he hadn't been hurt as much as he's been hurt, then I think we would probably have him up pretty high. I'm going to be honest, the way I was looking at the list, I didn't even have him in my top 10, and I'll tell you why right now. I'm looking at Nick Lodolo more like I look at CES and Noelvi Marte, and that is if they hit, then all the better for the Reds, and print the playoff tickets now. But conversely, I can't count on Nick Lodolo right now.
I get it.
I can count on him if he gets through spring training. I can count on him being one of the best 5 starters on the team, but I cannot count on him right now. I mean, we're talking blister issues, right? He couldn't get that right. I couldn't even put him in my top 10, and I hope I'm wrong. I hope by even opening day I feel differently. I hope by the All-Star break when we do this exercise, he's in my top 2 or 3. But I just couldn't go there with Nick. I love him. When Keith Law criticized him early on, I was one of the staunchest defenders of Nick Lodolo, thinking he was Chris Sale 2.0, right? But we just haven't seen it consistently. We've seen it in stretches, and that slider that hits the back foot of a right-hander. I mean, come on.
But they swing at that.
So, right. So, yeah, they just swung at it and they hit you in the foot, buddy. So, yeah, no. So, okay. I like it, though. I like that we're a little different here.
Me too.
And it doesn't mean we're right or wrong. It just means we're where we are. We're a little closer on this next one for you. You're number 3.
Tyler Stevenson, because this is it now, right? I mean, what we saw last year was really reassuring and confident, and I have no reason to think he won't be better this year. None. And look, I'm the guy who last year, my confidence in him waned in the summer, right? And then right after I said those things about him at our live show, he went off and had a great rest of the year. So you're welcome, T. Steve.
You shouldn't doubt dad's strength.
No, dude. I should. If anyone should know, it should be me, right? Like, I have a daughter, so I know what a daughter does to you. Seth, I'm honest with you, man. I think he's an all-star this year. I really do. I think that what we saw last year in the leap he took is only beginning. He's shown the ability to work a count. He's shown the ability to draw walks. He's shown the ability to be, he's getting better behind the plate. I don't know if I'd put him as like an upper tier Gold Glove candidate catcher, but I mean, the National League catchers, who's the guy you're probably taking over him right now? Shea Langoliers, and I think you can make a case that's closer than you expect. So, no, is that the guy I'm thinking of? No, I'm thinking of the other one for Atlanta. Am I thinking of Langoliers?
No, I think you're thinking of the guy from
Oakland,
from Dayton that he was traded from the A's to the Braves. And
God, what the heck's his name?
Figure it out. Sydney will tell us.
I was gonna say, yeah.
I had Tyler Stevenson number 6, and it's not because I don't believe in him. In fact, having him that high for me means that I do believe in him. I'm more kind of in a little different way, because it's not Cy Young / MVP caliber for a catcher, for a hitter. I'm more like you are on Hunter Green. I don't know that he can be much better than he was last year, but the comforting thing for me is we're not spending the offseason thinking he needs to play first base and DH a lot.
Exactly.
And he's wrestled that position away from anybody. Now, they get Trevino from the Yankees. I think the catching position for the Reds might be one of the best in baseball if you think of all 162 games that they're both healthy. But I do think the thing that makes him so valuable is it's a position we're not worried about anymore as far as your starter. Yeah. And so he doesn't have to do much better than he did last year for me. But I do think certainly familiarity with the staff. He's more of a respected catcher now, even like Hunter Green. I think there was something there maybe going into last year where Hunter Green didn't really want him to be his catcher.
Yeah, there was.
And I don't think it was anything personal. But I do think that he went to spring training, or even ahead of spring training last year, and said, I'm taking this. And he did. And all the more power to him. Could he be an all-star? Maybe. But even if he's not, I'm happy with them. So I had him at number 6. Now I had McLean number 3, as I said. I'll skip ahead to number 4, Brady Singer. Um, a lot like you thought, and I'm looking at your list. You had Singer at 9. Um, a lot of the things you said about Lodolo is what I feel about Singer.
Okay.
You brought him in for a reason. Maybe though his biggest value is going to be the fact that, and we used to say, like, remember Bronson Arroyo would get 200 innings no matter what, and that was kind of what you counted on, no matter what the numbers looked like. Well, now it's downgraded a little bit because pitchers just don't pitch as throw as many innings, but you're going to get 190 innings from Brady Singer. And even if Hunter Green is your best starting pitcher, Singer might be the bedrock or the foundation of turn in and turn out. He's going to do the job. So I've got Brady Singer as my number 4. And I guess that's where I'm combining a little more of what you think of Nick Lodolo and putting it on Singer's shoulders.
Yeah, I don't disagree with that. I think that he has, I mean, his season last year, Kansas City was obviously really, really good, and obviously had a chance to pitch in the playoffs against Cleveland. So has seen the ability to be successful. Like you said, they brought him here for a reason. Ground ball pitcher, Great American Ballpark. That's what they need. They need a guy who can get those innings, like you mentioned, Bronson Arroyo-esque. I think he is nothing more than a great asset to this team to make them better, and I think it's going to be a great fit for them as well. So I have no issues with the way you feel about him there and what he can bring to this team. I think you're right, and I'm excited to see what he brings to the Reds.
Yeah, this is not the Eric Milton trade. Sign a
No,
fly
no.
ball pitcher for a ballpark that you knew you built so that Griffey Jr. and Adam Dunn could hit home runs. Well, nobody told Jim Bowden that the other team can hit home runs here too. So, yeah, that was that. But I guess I'll look at your number 4. You've got Ellie there. I presume that's because you just know him as a known quantity now as much as anything.
Yeah, I think MVP is a conversation we could definitely have for his career, not just this year coming up. So,
all right, you've got Alexis Diaz at number 5. I will say I flirted with him at 10, but I ended up not putting on my list, and that's because he was so wishy-washy last year that I worry a little bit about what I can expect out of him. But I'm sure you're looking at it as like, hey, no, we need this out of him if there's going to be a successful season.
yes, we all know it. I'm not going to dig deep dive into it. Yes, I hate the term closer. I think it's stupid. But with that being said, Major League Baseball disagrees with me, and that's fine. So with this phantom position that the only one guy so happened to be able to do it for all 30 teams in baseball, even though we have 200 relief pitchers, Alexis Diaz is the guy the Reds count on to get those final 3 outs. And I think for them, they also feel like he is the most talented guy in the bullpen. And it's hard to argue that. So
yeah,
this is a guy who's been an all-star. This is a guy who has been up there in the saves leadership. This is a guy who obviously has a brother who's very talented as well. But has been linked to a lot of trade rumors throughout his time in Cincinnati. But I'm going to go with the route of, if they're really going to rely on one guy to get 3 outs in the 9th inning, he has to be your best guy. And last year, he wasn't their best guy in a lot of situations. He was very good down the stretch. I think in August, September, he was very good, and it wasn't talked about because everyone was disappointed in his April through July, and I get that. But the Reds are going to need Alexis Diaz if they're going to rely on him to do this one thing. And so this is the guy, and this is the guy you need him to be. And I think he knows it. I think he'd be the first to tell you he's not happy with the season he had last year. So I think he's going to bounce back, and he has to.
Okay, so it's come up twice on this show, and you and I have never had this discussion on or off the air. I just want to ask you, as far as closers go, while I could agree with you completely that there's probably more than 30 guys who can get those last 3 outs, do you agree that there's very capable pitchers who do very well in the 6th, 7th, or 8th inning who just don't have whatever it takes to get those final 3 outs, and therefore, even though they put up really good numbers when they've been put in that position or whatever, it's proven that they just can't?
Oh, 100%. I mean, I've talked to our good friend Carlos Guevara about this many of times, as a guy who pitched in the major leagues as a reliever. And when I've said this to him, he hasn't necessarily said I was wrong, but he has said, like, look, it takes a very special person to take the ball in the 9th inning and get those last 3 outs. My argument is not that that's not true. My argument is that every team only has one guy that can do that. That's silly to me. That's very, very silly to me.
Well, I guess from my point of view, we've seen, and actually last year, a lot of the problems Alexis Diaz had was when it wasn't a
Yeah.
safe situation. And maybe that's a chicken or egg argument. Maybe the powers that be in baseball have created this mindset of what a closer is, and a guy like Chapman sometimes was more hittable when he came in when it wasn't a safe situation. And here we have Diaz last year, from just the eye test, that's what it looked like. And maybe because he's been groomed to think that I only come in when it's this situation and I can't, I'm not going to be excited or ready for it if it's not. So I guess that is a chicken or egg argument, I guess.
And I'm not denying, the Emmanuel Clases, the Aroldis
Oh, wow.
Chapmans, the
Yeah.
Mariano Rivera's, the Dennis Eckersleys. Like, I'm not denying that those guys weren't like great at what they did. That's not my argument whatsoever. Like I said, my argument is, why does Major League Baseball think of the way of only one guy can do this on every team? That's just what's silly to me.
Okay. I'll buy that. I'll buy that completely. So you had McLean, Lodolo, Stevenson, and Ellie, and then Diaz is your number 5. I went Ellie, Hunter Green, Matt McLean, Brady Singer, and I have Nick Martinez as my number 5. And I have to admit, as much as you have said what you've said about closers and that mentality and the idea of having them, I was very skeptical of the, bullpen to starting rotation back and forth guy.
Me too.
And yet, Nick Martinez, I mean, after April, I thought, nope, he's a bullpen guy. Even if he has to give you 3 or 4 innings in any given day, then that's fine. We're going to use him to do that. But I don't think he's a rotation guy. And then when he had to be, he was one of the best pitchers in baseball for about 6 weeks.
Yeah, he was the September National League Pitcher of the Month.
Yeah.
And earned it. He was awesome. He was really good. And I mean, like you said, like, this is a guy who, it's not just starter or bullpen, man. It was like when they had bullpen days and needed someone to eat innings, it was him. I mean, how many times did he come in the second inning and pitch till the 6th?
Yep.
He was great. I mean, he really kept his team in games where, bullpen days are normally for most major league teams a day. You just kind of like hope for the best. And if you lose, oh, well, we pack up our bags, we hit the road for the next trip. But he was a guy that, like I can't remember the exact game in particular, but there was a game in the summer where he came in the 2nd and pitched till the 7th, and the Reds won the game. And that's the kind of guy that you can rely on for him, who can do so many different things for your team. So for him, I'm glad he came back. I was on record throughout the offseason very much saying that I would have said like, hey man, we'll give you more money to come back, because I didn't think he would. I'm glad I was wrong. I'm glad he's here, and I'm glad it was the same price. So I'm excited to see what he brings.
There were a lot of quote unquote smart people out there who thought he would turn down that qualifying offer, and he did take it. He got a substantial raise, and I had him at number 5. And I'm going to admit right here, I don't know if I have it at number 5 because I think he has to be in the rotation, or he has to do this or that. If he's willing and his arm allows it, I wouldn't be upset if it looked a little bit like last year. I don't know how many times Terry Francona is going to want to use an opener. If it comes to that, I don't. He's embraced some of the new analytic type things, but I don't know if he's going to subscribe to that idea as often. But no, I think Nick Martinez is just a valuable piece, and he's one less worry that the Reds had as the offseason started. Your number 6 is Gavin Lux. I have him at 7, so let's just go ahead and talk about him now. What are your thoughts? And I guess I'd couch it by saying, does it matter where he plays on the field as to his importance to you?
No, because that's the beauty of Gavin Lux, right? I mean, this is a guy, if you look at his baseball reference page, has a lot of different positions listed in his defensive section. Is a guy who last year, we're talking about the team that won the World Series, a team that literally only got rid of him because they were running out of spaces with all the big guys they were signing. So it was really, really good as he was recovering from his ACL surgery and post All-Star break, and then through the postseason. This is just a surefire hitter for this team that really needs a surefire hitter. This is a guy who is brought in to improve this offense, where this offense was very stagnant in times last year. We'd asked a lot about a right-handed outfielder. He can be a right-handed outfielder. He can also be a first baseman, a second baseman, a shortstop, or a third baseman. So this is like a really, what's the nicest way I can say this without it being insulting? This is a really, really good Ryan Friel. This is a very, very good Ryan Friel. And Ryan Friel was good. I'm not saying that by any means. But this is a guy who you can play anywhere, you can count on, and he's going to give you consistent competitive at-bats no matter where he's playing defensively. So we both seem to be pretty high on him. I think this was a great trade for the team, especially considering what they gave up. I'm really excited to see what Gavin Lux brings to the clubhouse.
I don't know if he's as fast as Ryan Friel, but he could be considered Ryan Friel with a pedigree
Yes.
because he was such a highly rated prospect. I know even the Dodgers held him out at certain trades, right, over time. He was rumored to be in a few big trades over the years, and they just wouldn't give him up. Um, I'm not going to lean in on a very, very small sample size of about 2.5 months of on base percentage, but I get pretty giddy when I see his on base percentage at the end of last year,
Me too.
and what even some close replication of that could bring to the Reds lineup. And then you start talking about where do you put guys in the order, and that gets pretty exciting as well. They still don't have the bona fide power hitter, except for Ellie's kind of becoming more of that. And that's where you wonder if CES or or Noelvi Marte or even Candelario could come with some slugging percentage to add to the lineup. We'll just see how that goes. But you had Gavin Lux at 6. I have him at 7. I don't want to see Gavin Lux really at short or third.
Yeah, I don't
Um,
either.
if he's playing third very often, I worry a little bit about how that looks, but it's not up to me. So they'll figure that out. So um, that leaves us. You had Hunter Green at number 7. We've already discussed him. I have Taylor Rogers at 8. And my only concern with him is he's getting a little older, but you bring in a bona fide bullpen arm to really strengthen that back end. And I think him being healthy and him doing the things he's already done these past several years will go a long way toward the Reds' success.
Yeah, I'm very excited about this. This was probably my favorite move of the offseason,
Okay.
realistically. And I think that his talent levels and what he brings to the game and how he solidifies this Reds bullpen even before the Scott Barlow move yesterday. Scott Barlow is great and he's icing on the cake, where Taylor Rogers was kind of like, oh, we have a big league bullpen for sure now.
Yeah.
So
Absolutely.
I'm stoked about that.
All right. So you didn't have him in your list, but you had TJ Friedel at 8. I have him at 9. Listen, TJ Friedel could take a little bit of a backslide, and if certain parts work right with the lineup and with the players playing in certain positions, and my number 10 is going to answer that a little bit too. Um, you could go without TJ Friedel being quite as important, but I think you and I both agree that just kind of the overall TJ Friedelness that he brings to the table is important to this team.
That and how much longer do you have this? How much longer is he going to play at this level? Because 23, like we said, I thought was a really great year. 24, obviously, he was injured for a lot, couldn't really stay on the field. Had great moments, but if this team, like we keep saying, if this team is going to reach what they can be, they need him to be 23 TJ Friedel again. And you and I think we are in agreement that we see that he has that in him, the ability to hit both lefties and righties. You can play him at multiple spots in the lineup. You can have him lead off. You can have him hit second. You can have him later in the lineup if need be, and he's willing to do that. And I think is a guy who we probably agree should have been more in the Gold Glove candidacy in 23 for center field than he was. I don't know if I would say he should have won it, but I think he certainly had a case to be in the conversation. So I really think that they need balls to the wall, TJ Friedel back, and I think that that's what he feels like he needs to be as well.
Well, and the problem is they didn't address it enough, because if you looked at what was available to them, obviously you said there were injuries, but if you thought about Benson, Fraley, Fairchild, and Friedel to a much lesser extent, because Friedel's more established, right,
Yeah,
and has put up some numbers. But if you could say, let's get rid of those 4 and bring in 4 average, league average to slightly above league average players for the next year, although TJ Friedel did get an MVP vote, as I discussed with Chris Carver a couple weeks ago, back in 23. I just think that may be a show topic before we get through all of spring training, is what areas did they not address enough?
yeah,
And certainly the outfield has to be that, right? I mean, they didn't have to do much in rotation, but they added Singer, and they've basically said they're going to use Martinez there, so that's pretty big to have that as kind of additions on Martinez. They added Lux in the infield. They have guys that were hurt last year or didn't play well, like Marte, that could be candidates to do something. But the outfield, aside from my number 10 guy, and now your number 10 guy as well, Austin Hayes, they just didn't do much. And Austin Hayes is that flyer guy that is coming off an injury / illness type year, and they're hoping he can replicate what he's done before last year. But if the Reds get what he did last year again this year, that entire outfield, if Friedel doesn't come through, looks pretty suspect.
Yep. This is a big I wouldn't say success is lying on what they get from him, but how many games they win can certainly be contributed to what they get from Austin Hayes next year because of how little they attacked the outfield. We've talked about it all offseason. We've named millions of names for that one spot, probably. And we saw the Santanders go on. We saw the Taylor Wards not end up in Cincinnati. We saw the rumors about the Lou Bob deal. They decided to go with Austin Hayes to go in the year. So knowing all those guys that they didn't get or passed on to get to here, there's a lot riding on Austin Hayes this year. And do I think he certainly is capable of being a 27 to 33 home run guy, especially in our stadium? Yeah, absolutely, I do. But how much are they expecting out of him? I think you and I feel like this is a guy who certainly has the ability to be that middle of the lineup power hitter for this team because Candelario has been so streaky and we have no idea what we're getting from CES. So I do like bringing him in. I think he has a tendency to be, he has a possibility to be a very great player for this team. But there's still a lot of question marks around him being there strictly because, not just because of him, just because, no offense to him, but was that it? Is that it?
Yeah, I mean, I like that signing, but especially if you told me that Spencer Steer might not be playing left field.
Yeah.
Oh man, I just think, and I'll take Friedel out of it. I value Friedel when he's healthy and just part of the team and being an energy factor. But if you could tell me that you could take Benson, Fraley, and Fairchild out and put in three guys, like you just mentioned they added a Hayes, and that was the one guy they decided to add.
Yeah.
Like they weren't looking. Well, I don't know what they were looking for. As fans, we're not looking at only one spot. We're looking at, you really need to upgrade two of the three outfield positions, if not all three. And just in consistency factor, if he can return to form, then you did upgrade one of the three. But day to day, I just don't know if Fairchild and Benson are on this team for even more than like 100 games. I seriously worry. And of course, what we already talked about with Spencer Steer factors in. Spencer Steer not on either of our lists. And we did make this after the news came out, and the news might not mean anything.
Yeah.
As far as value goes, though, if Spencer Steer, and listen, he seemed to be, he played left field, first base, maybe some second base as well, and he could play third base. He's very valuable that way. But the way the Reds have used him the last 2 years, it's been more like, hey, this guy over here is hurt, so you're going to play there for a while.
Right.
You know what I mean? Like he was a left fielder for a while. And then like last year with Candelario going out, and well, you're going to play first base for a while. And it's very valuable to have, right? The versatility to go, stop on a dime and go do that. But he's not on either of our lists. I wonder if by opening day or even by the All-Star break, we may have him much higher.
I'm sure we will.
I considered Andrew Abbott a little bit, but I just think he's Mr. Consistency for the most part, and I don't value, as far as importance or raw talent, that being there. And then Candelario could work his way into this list if he is healthy, but we just, in a Reds uniform, we just haven't seen it.
Yeah, I've already made the prediction that he will not be on this team come the trade deadline. So
I could see it, even if the team's playing okay.
Yeah.
Because if they do need to address the outfield, that could be in some way a way to do that, or maybe like get some prospects for him and then flip those for an outfielder as well. Well, hey, I put out the viewer mail call. We didn't get as much this week, but Brandon Kamick says, am I crazy, or should I put my mortgage down on the over 77.5 wins? And then he said, or at least Tim's mortgage. I was all for that.
Dude, I mean, I have a kid too, Brandon. What the heck? Like, she needs a roof. I wouldn't go as crazy as mortgage, but I do really feel like 77 is really a low number for this team. And a lot of it's coming off of what they did last year. Look, we just laid it all out to you. If these guys are healthy and consistent, we feel like this is a team that could really win the Central, especially because the Central didn't really have besides the Cubs, wasn't like the Central did a whole lot to make their teams better this year. So, yes, take the over and roll with it, because I think that's going to be an easy win.
A lot of these lists, a lot of these predictions are put out there by computers that crunch all these numbers, and we talked about last week. I think 77.5 is almost the lazy way out with the Reds.
Yeah,
And I know there if that 77.5 is from Pacoda or from even what Vegas says, then I guess, pardon the pun, Vegas would be hedging their bets a little bit, right?
yep,
Because it could be worse if none of the things happen that we hope happen, but it could also be a lot better than 77.5. So I suppose that's kind of the easier way out, or the safest way out, to put the over under there. But I just don't see Tito Francona like limping across the finish line.
I agree. I
And
agree.
if you put the Reds record on August 1st, these last 5-6 years, with the exception obviously of 2020, if you put the Reds record there and then insert anything, maybe an average of Terry Francona's record with Cleveland after August 1st, if you could put those two together, I guarantee it's well above 77.5.
Yeah,
So that's kind of what we're hoping. I don't know. I don't think this was meant to be viewer mail, but I'm going to use it anyway. From Skylar Webker, said, "I think we're seeing a Tito slash or quote unquote I can win with these guys team. Think about all his Cleveland teams. The highest paid player in that span was Carlos Santana and Edwin Encarnacion, around $18 million. His 2016 World Series team, their highest paid player, made $8 million. And of course, that was before Ramirez became older and better and more well paid. But yeah, I mean, that's kind of what we actually, Tim, that's kind of what I worried about when they hired him.
yeah.
Remember all the people that said, well, he didn't just come here so they wouldn't sign anybody. They're going to go out and get a lot of guys. And I'm like, maybe they got him so that they don't have to.
I mean, we talk about it all the time. We've mentioned it multiple times now. Niger Morgan had this team 3 outs away from winning a World Series. So, I think the Reds have better guys than Niger Morgan. They're going to see getting at bats in the ninth inning. So,
Well, and I don't want them to spend money just to spend money.
I agree.
So there's that.
Yeah, I
There's a
agree.
couple guys that sign. And listen, I'm happy to spend somebody else's money and say they shouldn't be so cheap, if that's the word we're putting on it. But at the same time, sometimes free agent contracts, we see it in the NFL too. It's chasing, good money after bad, right? So I don't want them to go crazy with it. That's why maybe a trade would have been so much better, because they'd be willing to unload some of the prospects for. And I don't even know if Robert was the guy, but he would be better probably than what we have.
Don't tell it to Offenbaker. He sends me angry texts every time I mention him on a podcast.
No,
So
he doesn't think you're right about that.
he does not. No, and that's okay. He doesn't have to.
All right. Well, hey, let's go back through our top tens, and maybe some folks can chime in on the Slack channel or elsewhere about what they think. Tim went McLean, Lodolo, Stevenson, Ellie, Diaz, Lux, Hunter, Green, Friedel, Singer, and Austin Hayes. I went Ellie, Green, McLean, Singer, Martinez, Stevenson, Lux, Rogers, Friedel, and Hayes. Again, let us know where we were wrong, because I'm sure there are folks out there that think we were wrong on that. But I think it was a good discussion, and I'm glad we had it.
Likewise. Yeah, that was a really good one. That was a good idea.
All right, unless you have anything else.
Late Night Reds back this week after our Super Bowl hiatus. We're going to be talking second base. So, lengthy Matt McLean discussion. And boy, am I excited to talk more Matt McLean, because I have missed it.
Me too. Me too. I can't wait to tune in for that. And Red Leg Roundtable, I'm still searching for my next guest, but go back and find Greg Vaughn. I completely enjoyed that discussion. Greg Vaughn.
That was cool.
It was everything I hoped it would be, because, when you think about Greg Vaughn and all he did for that 1999 team, we have fond memories of that. But his story about Marge Schott calling him at 5:30 in the morning, and he tried to do her voice, that was just stupendous. That was great.
Can I let me shout out one more thing real quick. Obviously, Welcome to the Jungle. You and Owen yesterday did the first off-season episode, just discussing the plans there, which was really good. But over on the Riverfront U channel, check out Red Brick Recap last week. They had Miami University head basketball coach Travis Steele on right before their big win against Troy. I know a lot of people here aren't paying attention to mid-major college basketball, but keep watching the Red Hawks, man. They're really good. They're really, really good. And obviously, Travis is my friend from his time at Xavier, so I'm very happy for him. But the Red Hawks, man, we got a lot of great coverage over there. We're probably doing the better Miami coverage of anyone out there. So Check it
Yeah,
out.
I'm way more outside looking in than you are with Travis Steele, but he strikes me as someone who, if Miami is where he ends up spending a lot of time, he's just going to do so well there.
Absolutely.
He may even ascend again to a higher level. But he seems like one of those guys. I know Gross was like that when he got fired at Illinois. He ended up at I think was it Akron.
Yep.
So guys like that sometimes resurface and just do really well. Jeff Bowles is doing a great job at Ohio University. He
Yeah.
was a long time larger program assistant, and that's where he played. So he's back home. But awesome stuff from Coach Steele there. All right, for Eric Davis, who I was reminded today in a 162 game stretch from June 11th, 1986 to July 4th, 1987, hit 47 home runs and stole 98 bases.
Pretty good.
Speak that into existence for Ellie De La Cruz. All right, for Eric Davis, for Chad Dotson, we miss you. We hope to have you back on soon. And for everybody else in the Slack channel and the Patreon, thanks so much for your help. So long, everybody.